Okay, very good. Very good. So, Melissa, you sent in your homework and thank you
I
very
did.
much for that. And then Richard was describing his homework to me, and that is not the pictures I got. So, you're going to see Richard's homework, but it's not the homework I think he meant to submit.
Well, I did wanted to do two of them, because I put homework two and then, I did homework one. I uploaded it Sunday, and for whatever reason, it didn't take. Maybe I didn't press, you know.
Yeah, somehow it didn't work, but you did send in some pictures. So I want to show you all what you did during your homework assignments. And I'm going to start with Melissa. And Melissa, you're working with the Canon 60D, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so this is where you were at f4.5, and it's a little on the bright side. Did you remember whether these were blinking at you on the back of your camera?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Oh, I remember seeing blinking, but I think that was the water fountain one instead.
Okay.
but
Okay. And it
It
could
probably
be,
was.
and it couldn't, if the pictures, by the way, are still in your camera,
Yeah.
don't go look now, it's okay. But you
Yes.
might pull them up on the back of the screen and then push that info button so you see your histogram, and
Okay.
then see whether that vegetation back there is blinking at you. Since you got your camera, I'll go ahead and let you look.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay. And so that, that's why all this vegetation back in this area is just all washed out. Otherwise, picture looks good. Your background is soft, just like it's supposed to. And then I want to really compliment you, because when you went through your pictures, now watch, you go 4.5 and you go 5.6, and see how the light's staying exactly the same. 7.1, 8, light staying exactly the same. F11. So you're doing your homework absolutely perfectly, just exactly what you're supposed to do. And so you've got F11, and then you go F16, and you go F22. And throughout that whole thing, you never lost your exposure. You're kept that meter balanced right in the middle of the entire time. And then you even went all the way down to F29. And so you did absolutely perfectly. And then here is where you see the good difference between 4.5 when the background is soft, and then 29 when the background is much more precise. So you did that completely and perfectly right. So gold star for that one.
Yay.
And that would be one also. This is a good example of if when you take your first picture, you notice that you've got a little bit of blinks going on there, then this is where you would go ahead and dial in your underexposure. And then from there on in the whole series, instead of balancing your light meter, you would continue to keep it slightly underexposed all the way through the whole series. But this was a basic photography lesson, so that now you all are ready that you can understand a little bit more of what I'm saying.
That makes sense.
So did you have any trouble balancing your light meter, Melissa, or did it do pretty well?
No, this one did fine. The next one I do have a question.
Yeah. So then here's the swimming pool. And as I said before, I let you all go last week, but you probably didn't totally register it. If it was sunny outside, it would be hard to do this lesson because the light here would be so intense. But you did 2/50th of a second, and you can, if you look real closely, you did it absolutely right because your meter's balanced. The scene looks exactly like it's supposed to, but the water's dripping off of these rocks, not totally solid, but almost totally solid. So you did a good job at 250. And then when you go to 1/25th of a second, the water's got a little bit of a blur to it. And then at 60th of a second, just a tiny bit of a blur. You can really see it right back in there. And then when it goes to 1/30th of a second, you can definitely see it. So we're starting to get much, much more of a blur in the water. And then 15th of a second, much more blur in the water. And then 1/8 of a second, it's nice and silky. And you can even see right in here where we can't see down into the swimming pool anymore. And then when you put them side by side, we've still got the meter being balanced. So the light's looking just like it's supposed to. But then, we've got the hard water right here and the soft water right here. So what problems did you have balancing this?
Well,
light?
when I kept going to try to go to a half and a fourth, I couldn't balance it anymore
Mhm.
unless and I didn't think you wanted us to do any zoom lensing, but I
Right.
did just to balance it.
Yes, I saw where you did that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's because the light was just too bright. We
Okay.
couldn't go anymore. And so Richard was saying, well, could we put a filter on? And this is a basic class. So yes, there are filters called neutral density filters, and they cut the light so
Okay.
that then you could go slower and slower and slower and slower and slower.
Okay.
But our light's been pretty intense. And this is just regular old ordinary Houston light for us, but it was pretty intense. So you did a great job on that one. You kept your meter balanced the entire time. The light looks exactly the same between the two, and the light looks exactly the same through the whole series. So A+ on that one. You did a good job. Yeah. And then Richard, on yours, and once again, these are not the photos you wanted me to see, but they do have some good discussion points to them.
Okay.
You were at 3.5 on this one. And then, you put your background back here. And what I really would have preferred you to do is not put that aluminum foil back there.
Because I didn't quite get an idea of what you wanted, because it said, covered cardboard with foil. Did you want it?
No. That's like, that's just a suggestion of how to make your own reflector. So that wasn't for the homework assignment.
Okay. I missed it.
Yeah. But you were talking about how that it's that your meter was getting thrown off. And so watch this between the three pictures. This is your 3.5, and that's your 4.5, and that's your 4.5. And notice the difference in the exposure.
Contrast.
Yeah, or the exposures really. So you notice the difference in the exposure between those. So this is 3.5, but see, this is 4.5 and this is 4.5. Notice the difference in the exposure in that one.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think at this time I changed the metering on it because I was noticing it was getting darker. And so I'm not sure, but I might have changed them to spot metering and toward that it was more evened out.
And it could be, but probably what's happening is that the sun is catching this aluminum foil back here and really, really, really adding to the exposure. And so the meter's trying to correct it. Now, if you're trying to use this foil covered with aluminum foil as a reflector, I'll show you how to use a reflector in just a moment.
Well, I didn't really capture what your intention was.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand, what I was supposed to or attempt to do.
Yeah, I'll show you when we get to it in just a moment. You don't include it in the photograph. So it's something that we don't include in the photograph.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I see your homework over here. You got your little assignment over there on the side. Yeah.
Right.
And then here comes your dog, and you sent me the photos of your dog. So I went ahead and added what your shutter speeds were on there. And so the 1/8 of a second obviously made your dog blur. So your shutter speed here.
Right.
And then your 1/10 of a second still makes your dog blur on that one. And then you got to 1/25 of a second. So now dog is not blurred anymore because we've got the shutter speed fast enough at the 1/25 of a second. And then cute dog, you got him even though it's an 1/8 of a second.
Right.
So that just meant, were you on the tripod at this point?
Yeah. Well, I was sitting down and have the tripod there.
Yeah. So luckily he stood still long enough, and then your camera was still long enough. You notice you got a little bit of movement in the ears.
Right.
And so sometimes, even though we are in a slow shutter speed, like the 1/8 of a second, we still can get the the subject to freeze, if the camera's steady and the subject is nice and steady, then we get a little lucky sometimes.
Mhm.
Okay, so questions on your homework assignments?
Well, were we supposed to do lesson 2 also?
No, lesson 2 is just,
I was
it's
like,
just,
wait a minute, I totally missed that.
no,
Okay.
lesson 2 is just as an extra homework
Okay.
assignment for you.
Okay.
Yeah. That's all that is. It's just, you know, if you want something else to work on after we're
Okay.
finished. Okay.
Shit, I didn't know that.
And if you want, Richard, if you want to upload your homework to that site, to that Dropbox site, then
Sure.
I'll go ahead and look at them and send you some feedback.
Okay.
Questions on lesson 1 and balancing your light meter?
Oh, me?
No, both of you.
Oh, okay.
Any questions, Melissa?
No,
No, you got it?
I think so. It
Yeah,
takes a lot of practice, I think.
it does.
You just have to keep doing it.
You do. You do. You just have to keep doing it. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I'll warn you now that even after tonight's lesson, you will not totally understand this. And that's why I just want you to come back and let me teach you a little bit more and teach you a little bit more and teach you a little bit more. Because photography is something that once you're ready to absorb the next lesson, then you can move forward a little bit. We can't learn it all at one time.
So are you suggesting to hold off on taking the second or the more advanced, or should we pursue it right after the other?
Oh yeah, you can go on. You can take any of my classes after this because I'm always going to go back and repeat f-stop, shutter speed, and ISO, and balancing your light meter and that type of stuff. Yeah. But I encourage you to come back and take more classes because it just takes a while to learn this and to get it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different modes on the top of your camera. So if you would go ahead, turn your camera on and move your f-stop to 5.6. And you all know how to do that now, don't you?
Yep.
Or last week you didn't know. Now you know how to do that. Okay, so the manual mode, you all have already learned that. And that's where you're dialing in the f-stop and you're dialing in the shutter speed and you're balancing the light meter. So that's the manual mode. Nothing when you're in manual happens that would be automated by the factory. So you're totally in charge when you are in the manual mode. But if you've already figured out dialing in the f-stop and dialing in the shutter speed takes, and Richard, just come on back to me because I'll let you play with your camera in just a bit, okay?
Okay.
So as you've already as you've already seen from your homework assignments, when you're sitting there dialing in your f-stop and dialing in your shutter speed, it takes you a while. And you know, the action might be finished by the time you're trying to dial in your f-stop and dial in your shutter speed. So I wouldn't say that we're going to shoot in the manual mode often, but what I do want you to do is I would like you to stay in the manual mode for maybe the next month if you continue to shoot, you know, so go out and take your camera out, practice it over the next month. And once you feel like you understand why you chose an f-stop and why you chose a shutter speed, then I would recommend that you go ahead and make one of the changes to one of the automated modes. And so your next automated mode, everybody's on 5.6
Yes.
right now? Richard, you're at 5.6?
Hold on, I turned it off again. Actually 3.5.
So put your f-stop on 5.6.
Okay.
Okay. So now on the top of your camera, rotate your dial to the A mode. Richard, you're a Nikon, so it's going to be the A mode, and Melissa, you're a Canon, so it's going to be the AV mode. So once you go into the A mode or the AV mode, what happens, and Richard, pay attention to me for just a second, and then I'll let you play, okay? What happens when you go into the A mode or the AV mode is you set the f-stop, and now the camera sets the shutter speed to balance your light meter. So you set the f-stop where you want it to be, and now the camera sets the shutter speed for you to balance your light meter. Melissa, you were using your back dial, your big back dial to change your f-stop, and now you're going to use your front dial. That's now your command dial. And Richard, I think yours is still going to be on your back side, if I'm not mistaken. So now put your camera up to your eye. Now y'all can play with your cameras. Put your camera up to your eye. It's at 5.6. And all I want you to do is point the camera around the room. And when you point the camera around the room, and take your lens cap off, Melissa. There you go. Now, when you point your camera around the room, what shutter speed are you getting as you point your camera around the room?
2.
2, good.
Well, now it's at 6.
6, good. Now point it over toward the window, Melissa. I can see there's a window right behind you.
1.
Which you get a 1, so you get a faster shutter speed when you point it at the window. So Richard, what shutter speed are you getting?
It's jumping around from 1/3 to to 1 to 1 or
Good.
1.6.
Good, good.
1/3.
Now you notice that it's very slow. So hold the camera really steady and just take a picture in your room. So just hold the camera really steady, understanding that it's a very slow shutter speed, and take the picture. And then is your light meter balanced?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Richard, is your light meter balanced?
Blurry though, because I'm holding it.
Blurry, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, it is.
Actually, well, because it's in aperture mode, I don't have the light meter there.
Correct. So
It's automatically balanced for me.
So Canon shows you the light meter, Melissa, but it's in the middle. Richard, as long as your light meter is balanced, Nikon doesn't show you the light meter, but that means your light meter is balanced. So now I want you to point your camera down at the ground, and you should, when you point your camera at the floor, you should get a much, much slower shutter speed, correct? Point your camera down the floor. You get a much slower shutter speed?
Yeah.
Point your camera up at this light. Do you get a much faster shutter speed, the overhead light?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you photograph the overhead light, or when you point your camera at the overhead light, go ahead and take a picture of the overhead light.
Actually, I can't because it's my card's attached to the other computer when I was downloading the pictures.
Okay.
Let me go run and get that.
And then Melissa, when you look at that picture on the back of your camera, you're going to see that where the light bulbs are, it's blinking at you, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that's aperture priority. So what happens when you're in aperture priority is you set the f-stop and the camera sets the shutter speed accordingly for you. Now, where you would shoot in aperture priority is if you knew what f-stop you needed for your photograph. So let's say, for instance, we have a field of bluebonnets in the springtime, and we're going to walk around the field of bluebonnets, and we want to just photograph those beautiful pictures of bluebonnets with the nice blurry background. So we would choose an f5.6 f-stop, and now we could just wander around the bluebonnet field and just photograph to our heart's content, knowing that that background behind those bluebonnets was going to blow out of focus, just like you saw in your homework assignments.
What about when you're doing like landscaping?
Yeah, when you're doing landscape. So let's say we wanted to do the whole bluebonnet field.
Mhm.
Then we would know that we had to put our camera on tripod, and we would set it on f22. And now we could do that whole landscape shot.
Okay.
And so if we know what f-stop we need, then that's when we can shoot in aperture priority. But think about this for just a moment. I shoot in aperture priority almost 100% of the time. So if I'm photographing birds, then I set my f-stop based on how big that bird is. So either a 5.6 or a 6.8 or an 8 most of the time, an 8 for a big bird, 6.8 for a smaller bird. And then I watch the shutter speed I get. And if that shutter speed is not fast enough, then I reach over, I grab my ISO button and I raise my ISO without even taking my eye off the viewfinder. So Melissa, you'll notice on the top of your camera, put your camera in your hand and notice up by your shutter button where you click your shutter, you see how you have your control panel up at the top? And
Yes.
one of those buttons is ISO, right?
Yep.
And then Richard, I think on the back of your camera, one of the buttons on the back of your camera is ISO.
It's on top.
It's on top? Okay.
Yeah.
So what the camera manufacturers have done is set your ISO button so that it is within reach and you can activate it without having to take your eye off of the viewfinder. So I'm looking through the viewfinder, I'm photographing birds. The bird is just looking at me and I'm doing perfectly fine with the 1/25th of a second while the bird's looking at me. I'm a bird photographer, so the bird leans over and poops, and I know that that means that that bird is going to fly. So now I raise my ISO so that my shutter speed can get into the 1,000 or 2,000 range, and I prepare for the bird to fly. So aperture priority can also be used for sports. You're photographing sports and the player is just sitting by the sidelines with a look on their face, so we can use that shallow f-stop so that we can get the blown out background, get the player to stop while they're just sitting on the bench watching the game intently. But then the player runs into the game. Now I need to get a faster shutter speed. So this is when I would change my f-stop, open up just a little bit more maybe. And if it's not enough, then I'd raise my ISO. So a lot of sports, action, bird photographers shoot an aperture priority. So we're watching the shutter speed, but we're managing it with our f-stop and our ISO. So that's aperture priority. Little counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just a bit.
Whenever I shoot bird photography, if anything, I mean, I'm now I shoot manual,
Uh-huh,
but I did before I used shutter priority,
uh-huh.
especially when I was shooting hummingbirds, because I wanted a fast shutter speed, whatever the aperture was, so I would shoot in shutter priority
Okay.
to
So-
get a faster.
Now that you've mentioned shutter priority, let me show you why we don't want to do that. So rotate to your shutter priority, that's your S,
Mhm.
or that is your TV, Melissa. So Melissa, it's a TV, and Richard, it's an S. And I'd like you to put your shutter speed now on 250. Melissa, it's still your front dial, and Richard, it's still your command dial. So put your shutter speed on 250. And Richard, you have your ISO at 200, and Melissa, you have your ISO at 100, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. So put your shutter speed at 250. And now I'd like you just to point your camera at that same wall that you just pointed it at in your room. And at 250th of a second, when you look through the viewfinder, is your meter balanced?
Yeah.
No, it's
No,
way off.
it's way off. Same
Yeah.
thing, Melissa, is it balanced?
It's pretty balanced, a little bit off, but not much.
Little bit off. Now, Melissa, point your camera toward that window behind you, or Richard, point your camera toward the light in your room. And when you use that 250, now is your meter balanced?
No,
Actually, it's not.
it's pretty dark in my room though.
That's okay. I want it to be pretty dark in your room. That's good. That's good. So what happens? Did you see your light meter when you looked over toward that window, Melissa?
Yeah,
Yeah, and it's out of balance.
just a hair. Yeah.
And is your f-stop blinking at you?
Yes.
How about yours, Richard? Is your f-stop blinking at you?
It was. I had I had to put my shutter speed down.
I don't want you to do that yet. I want you to keep it at
Okay.
250, please.
All
Keep
right.
it at 250.
Yeah, it's flashing like crazy.
It's flashing at you. Okay. So if you're in shutter priority, this is where you set the shutter speed and the camera sets the f-stop accordingly,
Mhm.
or tries to. If it can't balance at 200 at your light meter, then the f-stop starts blinking at you and the light meter shows back up, because the camera's trying to get your attention that I can't do this. I cannot balance this light meter. You are asking me to do something I cannot do. Now,
Correct.
the camera will let you shoot all day long. The camera will let you do whatever you want to do, but your camera is not balancing the light meter for you because it can't, because you've set the shutter speed too high.
Right.
So take your shutter speed, for instance, to, let's take it up to 2,000th of a second. Rotate your shutter speed now to 2,000th of a second. And when you take your shutter speed to 2,000th of a second, then you'll see it's still blinking at you, correct?
Right.
And then take the picture once you get to 2,000th of a second. And look at it on the back of the camera. And what'd you get, Melissa?
Black screen.
A black screen, exactly. So the camera in shutter priority will let you take the picture all day long, but you won't get a good exposure because you've set the shutter speed too high. So rotate your shutter speed dial until your light meter comes back on as balanced. Richard, your light meter goes away. And then tell me what f-stop you got, what shutter speed you got when your meter finally went back into balance.
So, okay, mine is it shows balanced at 500, but it's still blinking.
It's still blinking at you, so it's not balanced.
Okay.
No, so keep rotating until it quits balance, it quits blinking. And when it quits blinking, because you're a Canon, your light meter will show up balanced. Where'd you go when it finally quit blinking, Richard?
1.6
1.6, and then take
or
that
1.6.
and then you got it at like a 3.5 f-stop or something like that.
F4 or it's jumping around.
Okay.
4.5. Yeah.
Yeah. And what'd you get, Melissa?
I'm still messing with it.
So it'll go down into that like 20 or 15th or 8th or something like that. So try that.
Yeah, it's an 8.
An 1/8 of a second, and then take that picture and you'll see it looks like all the other beautiful pictures we've taken in your room.
It's a
Slow
little
shutter
dark.
speed. Pardon?
It's still a little dark.
Yeah, well, you've got to make sure that the light meter definitely is back into balance.
Yeah, hold on. It's getting there.
Good, good. Now, shutter priority is when you know what shutter speed you want. And Richard, you mentioned the Hummingbird photography where you would set your shutter speed to something like what, 500, 1,000, something like that.
At the time it was 600.
600.
Yeah, I was either 600 or 650.
Yeah,
I've got it on my profile.
that's okay. So when you were doing that, the only way to balance your light meter is to keep your ISO on auto ISO.
It was on, actually I had it at 800. The ISO on it.
Or you had it on auto ISO, or you had it on just plain, you were setting the ISO accordingly.
I set the ISO.
Okay, so what ends up happening if you use shutter priority is that you're chasing a balanced light meter all the time. So if you go in and you set your shutter speed, let's just use Richard's example of 650, you set that shutter speed, then you can be photographing just fine in the sun. But then once the cloud comes over the sun, then you could still continue to photograph, but you may not even notice that your light meter's not balanced anymore.
Mhm.
So you've taken a whole bunch of pictures and not even realized that the light meter was not balanced. Or in the event that you were using an auto ISO, sun comes out and it's really bright, and now we're using an unnecessarily high ISO, or the sun goes in front of the clouds and it gets dark, and we're ending up using an unnecessarily high ISO once again. So shutter priority is when you know what shutter speed you need and why you need it. And then you're also being able to watching out for that, balancing the light meter all the time. Because if you're not careful in shutter priority, it will give you an unbalanced light meter. Now, what'll happen if you're not paying attention in aperture priority, on the other hand, is you could get yourself too slow of a shutter speed, and you've been photographing along, light meter's still balanced, pictures look fine, but it might be that your shutter speed was too slow for what you were trying to do. So if you move into these automated modes, you still have to watch out for what you're doing, okay? So you still have to pay attention to what's going on.
So when is a good example of wanting to use shutter priority?
When's a good example of wanting to use shutter priority? I'll come back to that in just a second, okay?
Okay.
So, because then I can let you play with your camera just a little bit. The P mode, don't rotate your dial right now for all these other ones, but I just want to tell you what they do. The P mode is where the camera is set by the factory, and it's trying to go as close to 60th of a second as you can, and as close to f8 as you can. 60th of a second, most stuff's going to be frozen at 60th of a second, most people anyway. F8, most stuff's going to be in focus. So what happens in the P mode, the program mode, is that it's trying to get you close to where most stuff will be frozen, so or stopped. And it's trying to get you close to where most stuff will be in focus. But that's a pretty boring photograph, because you all have already learned how to blur water, and you've already learned how to make the background soft and the background more definite. So that P becomes pretty boring, because all it's trying to do is stop most stuff and make most stuff in focus. So that's a pretty boring photograph. On the top of your camera, Melissa and Richard, do you all have the lady, the mountain, the tulip, the little runny man?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just have seen.
You have seen? Okay. And under scene, Richard, don't change it now, but you've got all kinds of different scenes under scene. So under scene,
Yeah.
you got all kinds of stuff. So I don't want you to use any of these either, because you already know how to do these. So the lady on this one with the big hair, this is the portrait mode. And the portrait mode is just trying to soften your background. And how do you soften your background?
A low aperture.
With a low aperture, exactly right. You already know how to do this. The landscape mode is just trying to give you a whole lot of depth of field. How do you get a lot of depth of field?
Aperture.
16 aperture
Or 22
or
or 32, exactly. So you will see, you know how to do this as well. The little tulip mode, that's also just giving you a macro shot. That's all that is. It doesn't change how close your lens can already focus. Your lens focuses at a certain distance just because of the construction of the lens, but it's also trying to give you a blurred out background. How do you get a blurred out background?
low aperture.
Low aperture, exactly. And then the little runny man, the action mode, that's just trying to get you the fastest shutter speed possible. That's all that's trying to do. And I've already showed you how to do that. If we go into aperture priority, open up the aperture as wide as we can get it to our 3.5 or our 4.5, that lets the maximum amount of light come in. That gives us our fastest shutter speed, and then raises the ISO. So the little runny man, all it's doing is opening your aperture real wide and raising your ISO. So those scenes and those little icons that you've got on there, you know how to do that already. So you don't need those. And also why I don't want you to use them is you see this green box mode here, this auto mode. And Melissa, you've got a green box mode on yours. And Richard, I think you've got a green auto on yours. If I'm not
Yeah, it
mistaken.
says green auto.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, rotate your camera to that green box or that green auto. And then pull up the menus on the back of your camera. Just look on the back of your camera and push the word menu. Just look on the back of the camera and push the word menu. Melissa, how many menus do you have going across the back?
None.
When it says menu and they go across where they start with the red.
Oh, I got you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
You got 7.
Yes.
Okay, Richard, pay attention to this because this is important. You
Well,
got 7. You've got 7 menus, Melissa, in the green box mode, right?
Yes.
Now, go into the M mode and how many menus do you have? And punch that menu button again.
11.
11. So I don't know if it's the same thing on your camera, Richard, but in the Canon camera that Melissa has, if she's in the manual mode, she has 11 menus full of all kinds of stuff she paid for. If she goes to the green box mode, she only has 7 menus. And what happened is between those 11 menus and those 7 menus is Canon essentially deleted 4 or 5 menus full of stuff Melissa paid for, and she doesn't have access to them at all because they assume if she's using the green box mode, she doesn't know what in the heck she's doing. And so they took them away from her and you don't even know you have them. So I don't know if it's the same way in Nikon's, Richard, or not, but when you go into the green box mode or the auto mode, the camera manufacturer is assuming you don't know anything. And so they're taking away anything that'll hurt you. So I definitely don't want you to use that one. So if you stay in the manual mode until you feel real comfortable understanding your f-stop and shutter speed, and then go into the aperture priority mode, give aperture priority a shot, Richard, and see if you like that a little bit better, or the shutter priority mode. Now, Melissa asked why you would use shutter priority. So if you would, rotate your dial to the shutter priority mode, the TV or the S. So this is one instance where I do use shutter priority. Rotate your shutter speed to 60th of a second. Okay, got it at 60?
Yep.
Yep, okay. Now, point your camera at something and I would like you to pop your flash up. So each one of you's got a pop-up flash.
Haven't used that in forever.
Yeah, right on the left side, if I'm not mistaken, Melissa.
Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Oof.
Now, with your shutter on 60th of a second and your flash popped up, photograph like a vase or a whatever, photograph some sort of still object in your room, a vase or a bookend or something like that, some sort of still object in your room, just photograph it. And you notice that your light meter does not balance at 60, correct?
Correct.
Now,
No.
when you did it, Richard?
No, it doesn't balance.
Right, just photograph some sort of stationary object in your room.
I did.
You did? And then look at it on the back of the camera. And what you'll notice is it doesn't look too bad, right? Correct?
Yes.
Right.
Okay, and the reason for this is that flash is called a TTNL flash, through the lens metering, TTL flash. So what that means is that that flash, when you autofocus, knows how far to send light. And because of the meter being balanced or not balanced, that flash knows how much light to send. But because it's in shutter priority, the flash also knows It is not dominant. So it didn't completely blow out the scene and try to light up the entire room. It just went to your subject and turned off. So do something like put your foot out there and focus on the end of your foot and flash the end of your foot. I know that's kind of hard, but see if you can do that. And when you look at that, you know, it's okay, right? Correct?
Yeah, but you can, yes, it's dark. It's kind of dark around it.
Dark around it, exactly, exactly, exactly. So this flash is called a TTNL flash. So it knows how far to go and send light based on where you autofocus. And it knows how much light to send based on the meter being balanced. If you were in a dark, dark, dark room, then that flash would fire more light. But because that room is already balanced at somewhere around 20 or 30th of a second, that's what we've seen on some previous exercises we were doing. It's not trying to totally light up your foot. It's just going out to your foot and lighting it up. So where I would use shutter priority is if I were having a party in my house. And, you know, the light is like it is right now. So it's not horribly dark in your room or my rooms. It's just kind of the way it is. But we know that this is kind of a 20th of a second shutter speed or a 15th of a second shutter speed. But to make somebody stop, I need a 60th of a second shutter speed. So if I were just walking around my house photographing people at a party, I would go to shutter priority, 60th of a second, pop up the flash and fire away. So that's when I would use shutter priority. Make sense?
A little.
Little. And then also, I don't have to raise my ISO so we don't get a real grainy photograph. The 60th of a second is going to stop them. Now, on the other hand, if I were photographing a 2-year-old's birthday party inside, I might use a 1/25th or a 2/50th of a second shutter speed. So, you know, we got to vary it based on what we're trying to photograph. But this is where I know what shutter speed I need, and then I'm going to use the flash just a little bit. So that's when I would use shutter priority. Questions? No? Okay. So we know now you're going to use manual mode, aperture priority, and shutter priority. Okay. And then here are some other things that I do want you to use. I had these for you on your that's handout that I sent to you ahead of class number 1 so that you get your camera all set. This is why I've given you these items. Richard, you have autofocus continuous on your camera. And Melissa, you have AI servo. If you just look at your back menu display, not your menu, I mean your Melissa, your Q, and Richard, your I. Just look at your back display panel.
Mm-hmm.
So Richard, you're at autofocus continuous, and Melissa, you're at AI servo, correct?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Why I want you on that and why I want you to stay on this is when you autofocus on a subject in autofocus continuous for Richard's camera and AI servo for Melissa's camera, when you autofocus on your subject, you hold your camera and you're focused on your subject. If you move ever so slightly, the autofocus will go back to your subject. If your subject moves, like Richard, your bird moved, then the autofocus will continue to follow the bird. So by staying in autofocus continuous or AI servo, the camera is constantly focusing on your subject as long as your finger is halfway down on the shutter. So you just keep your finger halfway down on your shutter until you're ready to shoot, and that camera will keep autofocusing on your subject. Where we don't want to be, Richard, is your AFS, autofocus single, or Melissa, it's one shot for you.
Mhm.
And this is where we do not want to be. Because when you autofocus on your subject in one shot or AFS, the camera focuses on the subject. And then let's say you change positions ever so slightly to get a better grip on the camera. The camera is still focused on that point in space where your subject used to be, or your subject moves. The camera is still focused on that point in space where your subject used to move. So by keeping your camera in autofocus continuous or AI servo, you're going to notice that you hear the lens constantly focusing, but the subject is going to stay in focus. Okay, so this is a good thing to have, very good thing to have.
I also have an AI focus.
Yeah, and that's just totally useless also.
Okay.
So there's all kinds of other stuff in there, but that one's useless. Yeah, yeah. So it's AI servo from Melissa, and it's autofocus continuous for Richard. And then rapid release. So you see the 3 pieces of paper on top of each other. Richard, you got the same icon, 3 pieces of paper on top of each other?
It's for multiple shots.
Right, exactly. So that 3 pieces of paper on top of each other, Melissa, do you see it on the back of your camera?
I do not.
It
It would
should,
be on my cue menu.
yeah, it's on your cue. And you might see, look up at the screen real quick, Melissa, and you might see just one square
Oh,
like
yes, I
this.
see that. Yeah.
Okay, go to that one, push that in, and you'll find the 3 pieces of paper behind that one.
Okay, now I see it. Yeah,
Good, good,
I see
good.
it now.
Okay, so the 3 pieces of paper on top of each other, this is the rapid release. So this means when your subject is doing what you want them to do and you want to continue to photograph them, as long as you hold your button down, the camera will just keep firing. So you got a really good subject's doing exactly like what you want it to do. Richard, you got your hummingbird and it's in focus and you want to keep just firing away, then this is the 3 pieces of paper. And then under that same spot, do you have 3 pieces of paper with an H?
Yes.
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
Richard, do you have 3 pieces of paper with an H?
I have 4, but it's no H.
You don't have an H?
Mm-mm.
No?
Well, let me see. Let me go into, oh, my bad. I had to go into the menu. It's right now I'm set on L. It says one,
You've got an L and an H, right?
yes.
Okay, and then Melissa, you've got 3 pieces of paper with an H?
Yes.
And Richard, you've got a CH and a CL, correct?
Words, you mean continuous?
Uh-huh.
I've got it.
You
I've
should,
got, oh, I see what the deal is. Okay, you go down two menus. Right, mine's on 4 frames per second on the low or through the L thing.
but you have an icon on the back of your camera that's just 3 pieces of paper with an L or 3 pieces of paper with an H. If you push your I button, it shows up on the back of your camera, right?
Right, that's what I'm in.
Okay. Okay, so you get your 3 pieces of paper. Okay, so the L in Richard's case and the no L in Melissa's case with just 3 pieces of paper, that means that you're going to fire slowly. But your 3 pieces of paper with an H or CH in Richard's case, that means your camera's going to fire as fast as it possibly can. So I would like you to rotate your shutter speed, go back into the, let me see, you're in shutter priority right now, right, everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Shutter priority, go to your 4,000th of a second shutter speed. So rotate it all the way to your 4,000th of a second shutter speed, pop your flash down,
Pop it down.
pop it down.
Okay.
And you're at 4,000th of a second shutter speed, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you're on the 3 pieces of H, Melissa, and Richard, you're at CH,
Yes.
correct? Okay, now just push the shutter button down and hold it.
Do I point at something?
You
Point
can
to?
point it at something if you want to. Just
Okay.
hold. Click it and hold
Oh,
it.
hold
Hold
it.
it.
Ah,
See how fast it's going? Richard, do yours. Yeah. Now hold it down and tell me whether it stops shooting. Just hold it down. You're going to get a whole bunch of black pictures. Just hold it down.
no, not.
What did it do, Melissa?
It kept going.
It kept going. Richard, did yours keep going?
It keeps on going.
Okay, cool. Okay, so all those pictures are going to be black, but I just want to show you how fast your shutter can fire if you stay in that CH. So obviously we don't stay in there all the time, or that 3 pieces of paper with the H, we don't stay in there all the time. But if you've got some action that you're shooting, the runner's coming across the end of the end of the race, or the bird's getting ready to fly away or whatever, that CH or that 3 pieces of paper with the H is a really, really good thing to have. If rotate your shutter speed, if you would, down to 60th of a second. Now rotate it to 60. And do the exact same thing. Fire, just hold your shutter button down.
Okay.
Now you see it doesn't fire as fast, right?
Right.
Because it all depends on what shutter speed you've got. So if you've got a slow shutter speed, then it's not going to fire as fast, but your 4,000 is your maximum. So that's actually the fastest that you can fire. So the 3 pieces of paper with an H, or the CH in Richard's case, is good if you've got some real fast action that you're trying to catch. The majority of the time, I keep my camera on the 3 pieces of paper. Melissa, in your case, Richard, I keep my camera on the CL because it doesn't get away from you too much. If I hold my button down and I'm not really paying attention, I can get 3 pictures off. And so sometimes it's 3 duplicate pictures. But then, sometimes if I need to, I can hold my button down just a little faster. So that's where you use those 3 pieces of paper, or the CL and the CH in Richard's case. Make sense?
So you're suggesting we keep it there?
On the 3 pieces of paper,
Okay.
yes. Now the one shot, Melissa, that's just the one box for you, and
Right.
Richard, that's the autofocus S for you. That physically only takes 1 picture at a time. Push the button down, raise it all the way up, push the button down, raise it all the way up, push the button down, raise it all the way up. It only takes 1 picture at a time. And so I don't keep my camera on that very often, because it just, it's just, sometimes I want to go a little faster and sometimes I don't need to go that fast. So I like to keep it on the 3 pieces of paper, or the CL in Richard's case. And then the focus points also. You all have learned already how to move your focus points around, correct?
Yes.
So I like to also use one individual focus point and put it on my subject. So it takes a little bit of time to learn how to do it, but I find that if I can put that individual focus point on my subject, then I'm designing a better photograph, because I'm choosing to sometimes have my subject off center, or at the top of the frame, or at the bottom of the frame. So I use one individual focus point more times than not. But we do have the ability on both of your cameras to also have a large cluster. So you can go to a small individual cluster, you can go to a large cluster. If I'm shooting brown pelicans, which are fairly large birds in flight, then I might use a large rectangle. But if I'm shooting people, or photographing people, then I want to make sure that I photograph the person that I'm interested in. So I use one individual focus point. And if I'm photographing birds in the brush or birds in the leaves of a tree, I definitely use only one individual focus point so that I can keep it on the bird. Melissa, what do you like to photograph?
Landscapes, my kids,
Yeah.
sports. My daughter's a swimmer.
Okay.
So.
And how old are they?
Well, my daughter's leaving for college now.
Oh, okay. So you don't have little
Yeah, my
ones.
son is
Okay.
15. Yeah. So they're
Yeah.
high school. Yeah.
So the sports, Melissa, in the swimming, it's really important to use one individual focus point, because if you use even a small cluster or a large rectangle, the focus will be on the splashing water instead of on her. So
Okay.
keeping that one individual focus point on her when she's in the water will eliminate the camera getting confused and focusing on the splashing water around.
Okay.
And Richard, we're photographing birds. And so that one individual focus point allows us to cut through the leaves so that we can focus on the bird's face and not have the autofocus get stuck on the leaves. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. And then landscapes, definitely, Melissa, we choose where it focuses because the camera really only focuses on one spot. So even if we choose a cluster in a landscape, it's going to focus on one spot.
What about sunsets and sunrises?
Sunsets and sunrises, we want to focus on that thing that we're trying to silhouette, or the mountains that we're trying to silhouette around the sunrise or the sunset.
Okay.
Okay. So Melissa, on your camera, you've already found your
Flash.
flash. You already found that one, so we got that. And then you've already found how to operate on the back of your display panel, right? Using your Q button and then toggling around.
Yes.
So you're moving around on your back pretty good then. And then here's your individual focus points right here. Push that button and then the little icons right here.
Mhm.
So you're up to speed on
Yeah,
all that.
Yeah.
And then up on the top, you've got
Yep.
autofocus buttons so that you can change that immediately. You've got your 3 pieces of paper or your drive, you've got your ISO, and then you've also got your light meter right there. So you've got 4 important buttons right up on the top of your camera.
Okay.
Easy to reach with your finger. So you can either access them on the back or you can access them on the top. And then Richard, you've got your display panel right here with your I button on the back. And then you just simply move around with your
Navigation.
toggle.
Mhm.
Yeah. Can you also touch screen on the back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. I thought you could. And then once you highlight that, then you can go into that and see what all your options are. So it makes it
Yes.
super, super simple to do. And then Richard, if you look through the viewfinder, you can also see this display panel.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay, good.
That's what I have it set
Yeah.
on.
And so that makes it nice because if you look through the viewfinder, then you don't have to take your eye off the camera to make any choices or changes that you need to make.
Mhm.
So the more we can change without having to take our eye off the camera, the better, off the viewfinder, the better it is. And then Richard, you found your flash right there already.
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay. Okay. Either one of you all have an external flash, a top mounted flash?
No.
No.
No, not yet. I
Okay,
wanna-
so Melissa, it would be your 430, and Richard, it would be your 500. And so Richard, in your camera, you've got a 500, you've got a 700 and a 900. And then Melissa, you've got a 430 and a 600. That 430 for you, Melissa, is perfectly fine. And Richard, the same thing, your 500 is fine. Unless you just want to spin for top of the line.
You're saying, what is the 500? Well, what do you,
For the Nikon, it's an SB 500.
okay.
It's a good flash.
Oh, okay, okay. In case I get into weddings, I'd kind of like to have an external flash.
You'll definitely need an external flash. Yes, you will. And then a whole lot more complicated than that. And then Richard, something on the back of your camera that you need to do as well is that you need to go into this back display menu right here.
Right, I've
And you
seen.
need to go down to bracketing flash. So if you would do that for me, I would appreciate it right now.
Sure.
So go into your menu, go to your pencil, and then go to the E menu and go to E1.
Okay. Which one is, oh, this is that pencil. Okay.
I'm sorry, I lost you. 'cause
You don't have to do this, Melissa. You're good.
Okay.
You-
Okay.
Okay, go to autofocus.
Go to bracketing flash E,
Okay.
and then go to E1.
Okay, I'm there.
Okay, and when you go to E1, Richard, go all the way up to the topmost auto FP.
Okay, it says 1/200 second auto FP.
Good. Set it there for me, please.
Okay,
Okay. Okay.
it's set.
It's set. Good. Okay. Now come on back to me for just a second. And then if you would, both of you, all you have your flash popped up, correct?
I can.
Yes.
Pop your flash up.
Mhm.
Okay, good, good. So when you pop your flash up and your flash is popped up, we've already played around with shutter priority so that you can see how that works. Now I'd like you to rotate the dial to aperture priority. So to A or AV. Got it? And
Okay,
now look through the viewfinder, point your camera down at your foot again if you want to. And then what shutter speed are you seeing when you point your camera down at your foot?
right
120.
now at 160.
60. What do you have, Melissa?
1/20th.
1/20th. You see the difference between those two? So go ahead and photograph your foot if you want to. And Melissa, you noticed that it was the 20th of a second that we had last time, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Now, Richard, you noticed that you're at 60th of a second, correct?
Right.
Okay, so both of you all pop your flash down. Point your camera at your foot again, and what shutter speed do you get?
1/10th.
10th of a second.
1.6.
1.6. Pop your flash up. What shutter speed do you get?
Back to 1/20.
160th.
1/60th. Now, Melissa, you notice on your camera you get the same shutter speed pretty much every time, right?
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah. But Richard, if you have your flash popped up, you get 60th of a second. And if you don't have your flash popped up, you don't get 60th of a second, right?
Right.
Okay, so Richard, what you've got in there when we go to aperture priority is you have a factory preset. So what I would like you to do is if you would look at your back display panel on your camera
Okay.
and you see where you have your little flash icon there. And Melissa, you don't have to do this.
No, no, I'm at the pencil.
No. You're just your display panel, not your menu, your display
Oh, my
panel.
bad.
That's okay.
Oh, okay.
Your display panel. You see where it has a little flash icon?
Yes.
Okay, push that flash icon, go to that little flash icon and activate it.
Okay.
Toggle over to your little flash icon, activate it. And when you push it down, you'll notice that one of your options is rear or slow rear.
Huh. I think I'm gonna have to put it on menu.
No. You do not.
Not menu, I meant on my display so I can touch the.
Oh, okay, touch it. Yeah, it's easier to touch sometimes. Touch
Okay.
the little flash and you've got 3 options or 4 options there. When you rotate, you might need to rotate your dial to get the options to show up.
Okay.
That's how the digital SLR and icons work. And one of your options is rear or slow rear.
I'm having a hard time. My finger's so fat that it's
Should be under your lightning bolt icon.
okay, I think, well, do you see that?
I can't see there, sorry. No, I'm sorry, it's just too small for me to see.
Okay. Okay, I see flash here.
Also, if you push your lightning bolt button on the side of the camera, it should automatically come up on the back of your display panel as your flash menu. Push and hold your lightning bolt button
Wait, just, okay.
and then rotate your dial and you should be able to see your options show up as well.
Okay, I've got a lightning bolt and then a lightning bolt with an eye, I guess, an eyeball. Then a lightning bolt slow, and then lightning bolt, eyeball slow. Oh, rear, you said,
Yes, yes. Please set it to that.
okay.
Okay, and now flash still popped up, point at your camera at your foot, and you will notice that now you have a slow shutter speed and not that 60th of a second.
Okay.
Now,
Uh,
Melissa, what we had to do there is Nikon's and Olympus and Sony and Fuji and Pentax all come from the factory preset that if you use aperture priority and you pop your flash up, whether you like it or not, you have to use 60th of a second shutter speed. That's the only shutter speed you can use. So what we did by moving Richard's camera to rear is we have deactivated that factory preset, and we've
Oh.
freed him up to be able now to use his flash on any shutter speed he wants. So that's
Huh.
why we had to go through that setting there. So Richard, you want to leave it on that rear, and then you also want to leave it on the 320 auto FP. And in the flash class, I'll explain to you why we did that. Okay. So your shutter speed went slow, Richard?
It says 1-1.6.
Yes, that's slow. So the shutter speed's the same as whether you've got your flash popped up or not.
Okay.
Okay, so we unset that factory preset. So that's another reason why I don't want you to go into those automated modes, because sometimes you don't know what they have set in there. So
Mhm.
if you look at this photograph of this young lady, look at the shadows down in the lower left-hand corner. You see how hard those shadows are and how precise those shadows are down there?
Yes.
So that tells you that on her face, there are probably some shadows. But by using the flash, and in this case, I'm just doing an aperture priority, you see the background is blurred, so I'm using a 5.6, I'm focused on her face. And then this is me using my Canon 430EX, and I've got it set on TTNL. That's one of what you set the top mounted flash on. Come to class and I'll show you why we do that. But now the flash just lights her face up, but it doesn't look like she's flashed, does it? It's just a
No.
very gentle light. And that's what these flashes will do if you know how to set them.
Hmm.
If you're going to use a flash, either your pop-up or the top mounted, because either one will work. And if we happen to have these little twinkly, sparkly lights around, like you might have them in your backyard, or you might have them at a family gathering, or even a restaurant or something like that, position your subject so that they've got these lights behind them, and it gives a little bit more, interest to the photograph. So in the event that you've got these little lights, in somewhere in the environment, to position your subject so that they're in the background. If you're ever going to throw a party at your house or in your backyard, I'd suggest that you just throw up a whole bunch of these lights also, just to make the photos look a whole lot more interesting. But you see, you can't tell I've used a flash on this, because the flash just goes out, hits the subject and turns off. And that's because we've got it set on TTNL. So it's not a real dramatic flash.
Is that shutter priority?
This is aperture priority. But you could do the exact same thing on manual and balance the light meter. But with this one, I had enough light outside to be able to go ahead and use aperture priority. Now, shutter priority, which you just asked about, this is a genet in Africa. It looks like a cat, but it's really a mongoose. And it comes out at night in the rafters of the restaurant where we eat sometimes. And it feeds on the insects up in the thatched roof house. And, this is just too cool of a critter to not take a picture of it. But this critter's moving. It's moving around. It's not tame. This is a real wild animal. So this is 60th of a second shutter priority. I'm telling my flash to go out, hit the subject, turn off. The 60th of a second is set so that it'll stop the critter. And then when I know, obviously it's not going to work if the critter's moving real fast, but he usually doesn't move too fast in the beginning. And then the flash just goes out and hits him and turns off. And if there happens to be any ambient light in the background, then I can see that, and you can see it in this photograph. So this is that 60th of a second. The light's getting low. I'm going to use my flash for this. And then, and Richard, I know you've definitely got a dog in your house. And then Melissa, I know you got some little ones in your house. So this is a
I
wonderful
have
thing.
3 dogs too.
3 dogs too. Okay, so this is a wonderful thing just to practice and see how it works, because it works really well. So it's 60th of a second. We know that they're going to stop. We might get a little red eye, but I'll show you how to fix that later on in Lightroom or Photoshop. And then once we go into full darkness, if we want to photograph people, then once again, if we've got any of those lights, so that we can put them up against some sort of a light source, then it makes it a lot more interesting. Even if this were of the shop windows or something like that, but if we've got any sort of light source we can put them up against, this is, once again, shutter priority, 60th of a second, pop the flash up. So the flash here is being told, go out to the focus point. I focused on her, go to the focus point and turn off. It's being told just to do that, not to light up the entire subject. Okay. So this is called, go ahead, Richard.
No, I said I love it.
Yeah. So this is what we used to call fill flash in the old days, but this is through the lens metering flash on these modern cameras. It's an amazing process. It works really, really, really well. So practice this one. And then even during the day, we can use that flash for different things. So this is the Cadillac Ranch up in Amarillo, Texas. I was working on my husband's book, Backroads of Texas, and I had to travel all over Texas and photograph all the stuff he was going to write about, no matter what the weather conditions were. So I arrived up in Amarillo in the Cadillac Ranch in a snowstorm, freezing cold, driving wind. And I was trying to figure out how in the heck am I going to make this thing look good? So I'm thinking, well, okay, these people came up with this pretty dog. So let me throw the dog in there. You know, a good dog makes anything look good. Everyone, you know, let's try it. So with my top mounted flash, I can twist it to the side so that it's pointing toward the dog. I put my focus point over on the side, so it's on the dog. So that tells the flash, go over here. So even though I've twisted the flash now knows to go over there and hit that dog, focus on that dog, and then click the shutter. Shutter opens, flash fires, flash turns off, and I get my shot. Now, what's neat though, is I didn't realize it till I took my first photo that the flash lit up all the metallic paint on the cars. So even though I didn't see all those beautiful colors on those cars because it was so overcast and ugly outside, the flash lit it up. So that flash can come in very, very handy. So it's definitely worth it to invest in a top mounted flash because we can do some fun stuff with it. And then this is called a reflector. Now that was the cardboard covered with aluminum foil, Richard. But this is called a reflector, and a reflector is where it's a round disc about 24 inches across, and it has silver on one side, gold on the other side, and then we can twist it and put it into a small disc and put it back in its little case. And in this case, there's sunlight coming in from upper right, so up where my cursor is right now, and then the reflector is lower left. And it's on the silver side because the lady has pink skin. So since it's a pinky skin, we would use the silver on her. If the woman had an olive complexion, we would use the gold on her. So this silver reflection now reflects light up on her face. And this reflector also makes the female face very, very soft, because the light doesn't accentuate the wrinkles. And so a reflector is a nice, kind thing to use to add a little bit more light to our photographs. So this is called a 5-in-1 reflector. They cost $29.95 on Amazon.com. It can be delivered to you in 3 to 4 days. And one side's silver and one side's gold. The interior, this little part right here, is a diffusion panel. So in the event we had a lot of really harsh sunlight shining on a subject, we could hold it up between the subject and the sun and it would soften the light. So this is a 5-in-1 reflector to add light. And here's a good example of where we would use that 5-in-1 reflector. So the photo over on the left is just normal. The light's getting really, really harsh. The shadows are getting very, very intense. But by putting the reflector off camera, see how we're using it off camera, Richard? So we're not seeing it. By putting it off camera,
Right.
if you can see the light reflected by the reflector onto your subject, then you know you're going to see it on the finished photograph. So all that we did is lean the reflector up against a wall and then positioned it so that it was reflecting up on her face. And then that softened all those shadows on her face and on the back of her dress.
I see.
So that reflector is a really, really nice gadget to have. Very, very nice. So
Well,
that's the end of Flash. I've got a whole class on Flash coming up in August if you want to learn the whole thing about Flash, but Flash is a very complicated subject. So my next thing to teach you about tonight is called flat to the film plane. Flat to the film plane. Now, neither of you all have film anymore, but the sensor is absolutely flat in the back of the camera. Depth of field goes out absolutely parallel to the sensor. So when you hold your camera, let's say this is your camera, when you hold your camera like this, then your depth of field is absolutely parallel to the camera. If you tilt your camera like this, your depth of field goes like this. If you tilt your camera like this, your depth of field goes like this. So your depth of field is absolutely parallel to the back of the camera. To get all of those water drops on that canna lily in focus with my shallow depth of field, look at the flower and you'll see how shallow that depth of field is. You know, I'm dealing here with maybe, you know, a couple of fractions of inches. I make sure that the camera is absolutely parallel to all those water drops. So that's called flat to the film plane. So you're trying to maximize that shallow depth of field to make the human eye think that you're using more depth of field than you've got.
Did you zoom in, or are you using I mean, you zoomed in to get that shot?
So I'm using a 300mm lens. So I'm using a fixed lens here. Yeah. See how the wings of the butterfly are all in focus all the way
Yes.
top to bottom. The antennas are in focus all the way top to the bottom, and the stick is in focus all the way across. So I've made sure that I'm holding my camera absolutely parallel to that butterfly. No tilt either way, to get that depth of field absolutely flat. So your depth of field is a flat parallel plane to the back of the camera. So we have to hold that camera exactly like we want it to be to maximize our depth of field. So here's a good example of this, a caiman down in the Pantanal of southern Brazil. I'm using f8 here, and I'm focused right on the nose of the caiman, and look how the depth of field right past the middle of the snout of the caiman. See how the eyes are in focus and see how the jowls are out of focus? So that's f8. But if I pull the boat right up parallel to the caiman and still use an f8, now the caiman's totally in focus, or it appears as though the caiman is totally in focus. So it's called flat to the film plane to maximize our depth of fields. Good with that one?
For now.
Okay, good. Now you all are going to notice this since you both are dog owners. If those dogs have long snouts, you want to make sure to focus on the eye, because if you focus on the nose and your depth of field is too shallow, the eye will be out of focus, but the nose will be in focus. So you got to make sure you focus on the eye, or do the dog's face from the side And now we can get the whole dog's face in focus. Tripod, this is the tripod I recommend you buy. This is called a MePhoto Globetrotter Classic Carbon Fiber Tripod. What I like about this tripod is it comes with everything you need in one package. You don't have to buy anything extra. It costs $319.
Oh,
It weighs 3 pounds and it folds up to 1.5 feet. So it folds up to a little short of a foot or a little more than a foot. So that means when I travel overseas or I travel, in an airplane, this tripod only takes up 3 pounds in my suitcase. And when I fold it all the way up, I can put it on the top of my suitcase and it can fly with me. And so this will extend all the way to my height, to a little bit above my height. And then it comes with a professional level ball head, so you don't have to buy an extra ball head. And it comes with an Arca Swiss plate, which is the top of the line design plates. So it comes with everything you need. Nice thing about it too is the MePhoto Globetrotter Classic Carbon Fiber Tripod comes in several colors. So those little accent colors where they're silver here, you can get it in gold, silver, titanium, blue, green, red. They're purple, yellow, orange, and pink up there. Okay, so you can get it in any color you would like. Not any color, but a variety of colors anyway. So it's a sturdy tripod. It's a good tripod, and it is definitely a well-made tripod. So you'll like this one. I've used mine now for going on about 6 or 7 years, and I don't treat it very well, and it is still rolling right along. So lenses. What lens do you have on your camera right now?
I have an 18 to 55 millimeter.
18 to 55. Good. Richard, what do you have?
it's 15 to 45.
15 to 45. Okay, so both of you all, what you have is a little wider than what the eye sees. So if you look just straight forward, don't move your head one way or the other, don't rotate your eyes one way or the other, that field of view you have is equivalent to a 50 millimeter lens. But that 18 or that 15, that means we kind of move our head from one side to the other, or we look up, or even if we're facing forward, we move our eyes from one side to the other. So that 18 or that 15 gives you, almost a room size view. It works pretty well. So, it's a good starting point. But if you want to do landscapes, then I would encourage you to invest in what's called a grand landscape lens. So this would be a super wide angle lens. So what you see right here is in the, for both of you all, the 10 to 22 range or the 10 to 35 range, depending on what it might be. Richard, you can interchange lenses, can't you?
Yes, ma'am.
On that, I thought you could. Okay. So this would be your 10 to 22 or your 10 to 21 or something like this. This grand landscape lens can give us almost a 180 degree field of view. This is what you would get if you moved your head from side to side and up and down. So this is a grand field of view. This is what we use for landscape photography. We may not use this to photograph a group of people like humans. That sounded stupid. We may not use this to photograph a group of humans because anybody at the edge is going to be 10, 15, 20 pounds heavier because there's distortion at the edge. But this is what we need if we're photographing landscapes. If the sky is really, really good, we tilt the camera up ever so slightly to exaggerate how big the sky is. And
Is there a filter involved in this?
Nope. But this was post-processed with Nik. It's an add-on software. So
Okay.
Post-processed with Nik. The beautiful thing about these super wide angle lenses is that they focus relatively closely. So we can put them down in the wildflower field and still get the entire field. So these are the lenses that we would use for our landscape photography. And the lenses you all have right now are just kind of intermediate right in the middle. But I want to show you a little video that I created, or a GIF that I created. This is every lens I could get my hands on one day, going all the way from 500 millimeters to 10 millimeters. And the 10 millimeters is the one I told you about, that you could see everything. And you see, if when we go all the way back to 10 millimeters, whoop, you can't even see that building way at the end. And so what lens you use and what lenses you buy are all based on what you want to photograph and what you need to photograph. There we go. I'll let you quit looking at that one. Lenses are tools. I don't own a lens because a friend owns a lens. I own a lens because I need it. The same thing as if my home handyman comes into my house and he looks at the faucet that I want him to fix. He knows exactly what wrench and what tools he's going to pick up to fix it. So when you look at a scene, you should get to the point where you know that I need my 15 to 85 for this, or I need my 10 to 22 for this, or I need my 70 to 300 for this. If you're unsure about lenses, I'd suggest that you rent them first or borrow them from a friend. So here in Houston, we have 2 lens rental companies, and then there's another company called Borrow Lens that'll ship it to your house. And so I suggest before you buy a lens, unless you're absolutely sure it's a lens you need, that you rent it first to see whether, borrow it from a friend or rent it, to see whether it's a lens that you definitely want to use and you are going to use. I own 5 lenses, that's it. And every single one of them are designed for a specific purpose, for things I photograph. But I want to show you the bokeh of a lens. So this is something that you can test out. Richard, how many lenses do you have for that camera?
I have 4.
4?
I think.
And
I have,
Melissa, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry.
Go.
I have I think a 35 millimeter lens, just flat.
Uh-huh.
And then I have this one, which is the 15 to 45. Then I have a 70 to 250.
Uh-huh.
And then I recently got a 200 to 500.
Okay. Okay, good. And Melissa, what lenses do you have?
I have this one, and then I have a zoom lens. I don't have it, it's in my bag, but I want to say it's like 70 to 200 maybe.
70 to 200. So you've got the 2 lenses that came with the camera, right?
No, I bought the other one separately.
You bought the other one separately?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I want to show you what's called bokeh with a lens. And bokeh is a Japanese word meaning blown out background or blurry background. So with lenses, photographers have what we call bokeh of the lens. And so this is just a little test that I did out of my office window one day. So this is the 18 to 55. Melissa, this is what you've got on yours, right? Mm-hmm. So the 18 to 55. And I zoomed it, not zoomed it, I'm sorry. I zoomed it to 55 and I put it on f4. And you see that we've got this nice blown out background back here. So this is called the bokeh of that lens. And you can test all your lenses to see what their bokeh is like. You can still see the screen, the little details of the screen that's on the window. So you can see that. But otherwise, you can't really tell what's out there, except, you might know that there's some trees or something like that. So that's the bokeh of your 18 to 55 millimeter lens. This is the same setup, but with a 50 millimeter lens. And this is also put onto an f4. And this lens is one of those darling lenses. I talked about it before, of the Instagram group or the Pinterest group, because they like how blurry the background looks. And you can see from this one that how blurry the background is compared to the 18 to 55. And then this is a 70 to 200. Nikon makes these, Canon makes these, and this is in their professional line. So both of them, Nikon and Canon, both make the professionals. And this is at an f4 and the same background. So you can see it from a professional level lens. Whoops, I'm sorry, from a professional level lens to kind of a moderate to an entry level lens. You can see the difference in the way that the background is looking. So in the event that it turns out that you want a lens for a specific reason, maybe the way its blown out background looks, or Melissa, you were talking about landscape photography. So this is where we want crystal clear at f22 or 32. So that's where we would buy specific lenses that can deliver that for us. So that's Bokeh. Test your lenses, see what they do, okay? And then come back and see me for some more classes. I've got a flash class coming up in July, and then processing in Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom. That's the second level class, but I'll offer the introduction to Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom. That's how we process our pictures. I think, Melissa, you sent me your raw files, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. Are you using Photoshop or Lightroom right now?
I have Photoshop. I don't like it. My
Okay.
daughter has Lightroom. She's kind of a photographer herself. She's better than I am for sure. She's moving though, but
Yeah.
she uses Lightroom, which she really likes.
Okay. So come back for the introduction class. Let me show you how to use it. Which one are you using, Richard?
Photo Elements.
You're using Elements. Okay. And the same thing, you might want to come back for that introductory class. And because they're all made by Adobe, Lightroom, Adobe Camera Raw, and Elements, they're all made by Adobe, I'm sorry. It depends on which one fits your brain better and which one you like to use. And so they give you different things. All my classes for August and September are also on the calendar. Yeah, Richard.
I haven't really been exposed to any of the others. So I've been wired to Elements.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what Elements does is it captures some key elements of the bigger packages. Because this is basically it's a cheaper form of the photo, I mean, what is it called?
Photoshop.
Photoshop. I think it's just a cheaper.
It's a stripped down version is what it is. So
Exactly.
stripped down. So we've got more features in Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw. And they're made by the same company. They essentially do the same thing. We've just got more features as we get into Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom. So come back for the introduction class, and then I can show you what sliders to use and what sliders to not use, and how to get your processing so that it's going faster and you know what you're doing.
So
Okay.
you're talking about it's post editing.
Yes,
Okay.
post-processing, exactly, because
So-
we've got to process these pictures. Yeah.
Okay. So once we do this, you think that would be the next thing to do?
I think you can take almost anything next, because I don't have any master's classes coming up right away. So any class that's on my schedule, I've got a bird photography in July, for instance, and then so any of my classes that are coming up next, you're just going to find that they're useful just for your learning photography, no matter if you like the subject or not.
What about your nighttime photography? I noticed that you mentioned about shooting skylines, and also I'm the class I took before you also talked about shooting street scenes where you actually, which I did, and I remembered some of it, but I forgot a lot of it.
Okay.
And
you
so
took my introduction to night photography.
I don't know what it was. It was a long time ago.
Okay, that's fine. Any class that's on the schedule, you're ready to take it at this point. If there's any master's classes that you see come on board, if you've had a couple of classes under your belt and you feel comfortable with it, then feel free to dive into one of the master's classes. But I just speak on a higher level, so give yourself a little bit before you're ready to do that. And then obviously, if you want to travel, Spain has now opened up, as has Northern Ireland, and we booked our airfare for the Spain photo tour and the Northern Ireland photo tours. We booked our flights yesterday. And then Costa Rica is coming up in November as well. That's bird photography. And then the Costa Rica in February is landscapes, flowers, frogs, and birds. So a little bit more diverse in the cloud forest. But, you know, come on back, take some more classes. If you want to travel with me, feel free to travel with me. Question. You made it through lesson 2.
Are there any good books that you suggest just to kind of use for reference or guides or additional information to kind of, you know what I'm saying, to kind of just have
So
on
I've
top
got,
of what we've learned from you?
yeah, I've got a book on Amazon called Photographing with Kathy Adams Clark, and it is this basic class. So if you feel like you need maybe a written version of this class, it's on Amazon. It's called
What's it called?
Photographing. It's an entry-level book called Photographing with Kathy Adams Clark, and it's on Amazon. And you download it, it's a PDF, or you can download it into your iPad.
Okay.
The reason why I'm not going to refer you to anybody right now is because we all have different ways of teaching photography. And I think some people just make it way too complicated. You know, I've got some good friends and I sit through their classes and I just cannot believe how complicated they're making it. So if you want to, there are books out there, but I just have to warn you that some people make this way too complicated. I think they do anyway.
Okay.
And you know what I would do in the old days is I would go to Barnes and Noble and I would just start reading the book, and if it
Mhm.
made sense, then I would buy that one. But there's some that I think are just making it way too complicated.
Right. Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, there's some good books out there on landscape techniques or bird photography or something like that. So those are some good ones. Yeah. But once again, you know, just kind of read it and see whether you like that person's photography.
Okay.
Okay, other questions?
Not
Oh.
right now.
I'm okay.
Super. I've enjoyed having you all in class. I hope to see you in another class one day soon. And Richard, you said I sent you a second homework assignment?
Oh, I had to put, it's on my camera. I have to,
That's okay. No. I mean, Melissa, did I send you all 2 homework assignments or just one?
No, I got 2. I just didn't do the second one.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead and do the second one. Have fun with that one. And then if you've got any questions when you're doing that one, feel free to send me an email. When you're buying equipment or looking at equipment, if you ever want to send me an email or give me a call, I would much rather see you buy the right thing the first time instead of buying the wrong thing. So if ever you have any questions about equipment, I'll gladly help you out.
Okay. And you're going to send us this second
I will.
recording?
So
Okay.
you get this one as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to stop recording now.